record the lecture. Okay, good. All right. So one announcement. Hopefully everybody got this in time, but all classes for the rest of the semester will be via Zoom only. There will be no more in-person classes for the rest of the school year. Okay, so what that means is if you are going to do your revisions, you actually have to go slide them under my office door on campus or mail them to campus. I've had several students mail their response papers, and that is totally cool, totally legit.
And I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Penley.
If we do slide them under your door, do we have to do them one at a time, or can we just do it all at once?
I don't know how to answer that because I'm not actually going to be on campus. Okay, I'm probably going to show up to campus maybe once or twice before the rest of the semester. Okay, so we'll say you only can bring one per day, but how am I going to know? All right, so my advice to you is do them all. All right. So that's how I'm going to answer that question, Mr. Penland, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. All right, so let's move on. All right. So anything else? Any other questions? All right, now so on my computer here, I have the story itself. I wish. Let's go away somewhere else. All right, let's go to, where is the story? Thought I had it up on my desktop, but I don't. No big deal. Oh, no. It is a big deal because I've got a PDF of it on my desktop. There we go. All right, so I've spent today highlighting and making notes on lots of things in the story, so I want to revisit that today. Okay, but before we actually get to it, I want to revisit our triangle model. Hopefully this is something that is sensible to you. So it's a way of understanding what it is that we read and what it is that we watch. So stuff has meaning. Stuff has meaning. That's one of the things I say a lot in my life with my friends and my family. That is, stuff means stuff. And yeah, the frustrating thing for me is that when we're talking about education, this top layer of meaning is basically the only thing that most people in the world know. Okay, so when you're talking about a story or you're talking about a movie, this is the only thing that people think that thing means, is the literal level or the diegetic level. Diegetic comes from the Greek word diegesis, which is the Greek word that just means the story or the plot. But stories have much more going on than just what's going on this literal level. And, People's Exhibit A would be the yellow wallpaper. Okay, so what I want, and this is actually a great story for showing you how this triangle model works. Okay, so let's just go over this, kind of layer by layer. All right, so the text is, the yellow wallpaper. Okay, and what you may have noticed on the story that we went to, which is just a scanned document, an actual published book that I think was published like in 1908 or something like that. And when the story was first published, there was a hyphen between wall and paper because, 100 years ago, wallpaper was a hyphenated term, and then it just kind of morphed into a single term. All right, so our text is the yellow wallpaper. And so so the literal level is you have a husband and wife who go out into the middle of nowhere and rent this creepy house because suffering from nervous depression, and her husband, who is a doctor, has prescribed rest and relaxation for her. And in these, whatever, 10, 12 weeks that where the story takes place, she slowly goes insane. And at the end of the story, she commits suicide, and her husband is too late to save her. And kind of at the end, it's a ghost story because she is a ghost at the end of the story. Anyway, so that's all that's going on this literal level. And I'm going to insert can we do yeah, okay, so let's insert a shape here. All right, so we're going to just insert, okay, this line that's going to separate. Why is my computer so slow today? There we go. All right, so this line is going to separate the literal and the allegorical meaning. And then I like putting this line there because this line actually shows you a very important distinction between understanding a text on the surface layer and understanding the deeper layers. Because the surface layer, the literal level, is what we would call where did my cursor go? And L. All right, that's probably enough. Let's move this. What is going on? Oh. All right, this thing is being uncooperative. Okay, so above this layer, you have the information that is explicit. And then beneath the line, you have the information that is implicit. So on the surface layer is the stuff that's actually said. And then on the deeper layer is the information that is implied. And this story is absolutely jam-packed with all sorts of implications. Now, one of the things that is probably helpful to understand when you're talking about movies and books and stories is that there's way more implied information than information that is explicit. Okay, I wish we could make that into a verb. I mean, we've got, implicit is the noun and imply is the verb. but explicit is a noun, but there's not the verb exply. And I want to make that a verb, okay? I officially want to make that a verb. So what you have on the literal level is the information that is explied, that is explicit. So, what is explicit in the story is this couple moves out, to this house, and she goes insane and she dies, okay? But what the story is really about is the stuff that's going on beneath that surface layer, the stuff that is being implied, or in other words, the stuff that you have to decode. And that information is beneath that literal level. Okay, so the next layer down is the allegorical or symbolic level. How was? See if I can insert. Okay, I think I can insert a text box. Okay, here we go. Man, that's going to take too much time. All right, so the allegorical meaning is that stories and events in a story don't just represent themselves, they represent other things as well. So in this story, and I hope you were able to decode this on Thursday, is that it's not just a story about a woman, it is the story about all women. So the narrator in the story doesn't just represent herself on the literal level, she represents all women. And the story that you read is the story of all women. And one of the ways that Gilman kind of stresses this is in a negative space. Because I gave you homework over the weekend, and that is, what is the narrator's name?
It's Jane.
No, it's not. There is a character in the story who is called Jane, but the narrator is not named Jane. Anyone else?
It isn't said.
Correct answer, Ms. DeBacco. It does not say. She is not given a name in the story. Okay, so what do you make of that? Why? Now, let me assure you, 10 years after she wrote this, Charlotte Perkins Gilman did not go, oh my goodness, I forgot to give her a name. What's up? What is up with not giving the main character in the story a name?
It means she's not important.
It means she's not important. It means she has no identity. Now, we actually have a good word for that. It's called cipher, C-I-P-H-E-R. Cipher means zero. She is a zero. So that is a brilliant move that Gilman made there. You have the main character in a story who is not given a name in the story. So which kind of is the story in a nutshell, right? And that is, she's basically treated as nothing by her husband. Okay, and but we'll get to what are the deeper implications of this as we get deeper into the story. Okay, so deeper in the political and historical level. So and the politics and the history of this story. Not that I want to get too far ahead of myself. Is about what life is actually like for women, historically speaking, and certainly, when this story was written, you know, it was written in the year 1890 and it was published in the year 1892. So this story is giving you a look at what life is like for women in the 1890s. And then, okay, like I said, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Not have a name, okay? She does not identify herself, but she does identify all the other characters in the story. And then, who is the husband? What's his name?
John.
John. Okay, why did Gilman give the husband the name John?
Because it's extremely stereotypical.
Because it is correct, Mr. Morphus. It is the most common name in the English language. Okay, it's the most common name in the English language. It was the most common name in the English language 1,000 years ago. And it's still the most common man's name in the English language. As a matter of fact, all languages have a version of John. For example, in Russian, it's Ivan. In Spanish, it's Juan. In Irish, it's Ian. Okay, in German, it's Johann. In Dutch, it's Jan. Okay, so every language has a version of John. But think about why Gilman gave the husband the name John. Okay, and that's just the most common name, but it's implying something. Okay, what is it implying? Why give him the most common name?
Because that's how most men treated the woman.
Very good, Mr. Bago. Correct answer. That the behaviors you're seeing in the story are typical for how husbands treated their wives. Or you could say more specifically or more generally, that this is how men treated women in the 1890s in the United States of America, okay? So, very good. All right, so there you see how the names are symbolic on this allegorical or symbolic level. So, but like I said, probably the most symbolic element of the story is the fact that the narrator does not have a name at all. She does not provide that name for you. And that is a rhetorical move, an argumentative move that Gilman makes. Okay, let's go deeper into the story now, into the political and historical level. One of the things I want to remind you about with this model is that as you get deeper into a story, the layers get larger. So of course, the allegorical symbolic meaning is, and then the political and historical level is much larger than the allegorical and symbolic level. But of course, it's much more complicated the deeper you get into a story. And for a lot of students, especially freshman level students, this method can be a little disorienting because you're just not used to it. I mean, I hadn't been trained to read things, like this until I got to college. And by the way, that's not higher education's fault. Okay, that's K through 12's fault. Okay, you should have been taught this model when you were in kindergarten, because you were certainly intellectually capable of understanding it, but I don't have any control over that. Anyway, back to the point, and that is, even though it is the most complex level, it's actually the easiest to get to, because all you was made. Okay, so in this instance, it is 1892. So that's the year that it was published. But a story is always about so that is 1892. Date number 2 is when it takes place, when the story takes place. So when does the story take place?
We don't know. She doesn't specify a special day or
Okay,
year.
we don't know. She doesn't specify a certain day. She doesn't specify a certain year. She doesn't specify a certain time, which implies a couple of things. What are those things?
That it could be taking place 1,000 years ago or today.
Very good, Ms. Bard. Excellent observation. And that is, this could happen at any time. Okay. And then the second implication is it's the here and now. Okay. And I tend to look at it more about the here and now is because of certain descriptions. Okay, so the descriptions of the house, the fact that there's wallpaper, you know, it's in the present day, it's in the contemporary arena. Okay, although I do like what you're saying, Ms. Bard, and that is irrespective of the specific historical details, this could be a 1,000-year-old story. Okay. All right, so that is when it takes place. And the third date is now, 2020. The year is 2020. Okay, so we are now reading this story 130 years after it was written. 130 years after it was written. So as citizens of the contemporary world, we are presented with, you know, a question that you should always have about reading something from the past or seeing something from the past. And that is, are things any different? Okay. Are things different? So you're getting a window into the I mean, so the story was written in 1890, which is still 30 years away from women getting the right to vote. Okay. And you might be wondering why. Hey, I wonder this every day. Why didn't women get the vote thousands of years before 1920? At least hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before 1920. Okay, because, and one of the reasons why I'm saying this, and I don't know where y'all stand in kind of the religious spectrum, okay, along the religious spectrum, but as a practicing Christian, I myself have read the Bible, okay, and there are 5 passages in the New Testament that says God is no respecter of persons. God is no respecter of persons. God is no respecter of persons, meaning God does not value one person over another person.
Yeah, but if studying religion throughout history as well as anything is entirely subjective. I mean, it used to be used to oppress entire countries.
Exactly.
So I can see a counter argument very easily being presented that, well, God created man first, therefore man is superior. That's not my belief, but that's how the interpretation of religion works.
That is an excellent analysis, but I'm only talking about those 5 verses. And they're all the same verse. Okay. So, I mean, I like what you did, and then you brought in some other evidence in your analysis of that, but all I'm talking is about that verse. Okay. So what else can it mean? What else can it mean if God says, I am no respecter of persons? So, second issue, also a biblical verse from the book of Ephesians. I see neither man nor woman. I see neither man nor woman. Okay, so I'm bringing this up because institution that has played the most prominent role in the suppression of women, Christianity has had a shameless role in the oppression and suppression of women, which, by the way, is 100% not biblical. So, anyway, so that's the political and historic level. That's a historical and political problem with how women are treated in the history of the world. Now, here's a question for you, and I hope all of us can agree on this, and that is, are men naturally smarter than women?
Are we allowed?
Thank you, Mr. Morphy. What's that? Ms. Bard?
I said, are we allowed to laugh out loud in class?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, but no one's answered the question. I've had one person make a head motion. I've had one person to ask, can we laugh out loud? But no one's answered the question.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Baco. Men are not naturally smarter than women. You want to know why? It's because God is no respecter of persons. God sees neither man nor woman. Okay, men and women got the same brain. Okay? They have the same intellectual potential, the same educational potential, the same professional attention. Men are the ones who achieved and women are the ones who didn't. Well, I can tell you that question men imprisoned the women. Okay, they stuck them in a house and did not give them the chance to achieve their intellectual potential. Okay, that's what this story is about. Okay, this story isn't just a story about a woman. It is the story of women. Now, by the way, an interesting thing about this story, the history of the story, is that it was published in 1892, and it got some reviews in the big literary journals. But then it was kind of forgotten until the 1930s, when scholars kind of rediscovered it, and they were like, "Oh, wait a minute! This isn't some ghost story. This is the story of women. This is the story of all women." All right, so let's. And anyway, before we leave this model, this is something I want you to think about. And I think I mentioned this on Thursday. Actually, I know I mentioned this on Thursday, and that is, for about the last 10 years, as I've been teaching this course, more than half my students always write their research papers on the yellow wallpaper, okay? And I think it's because of these issues. And one of the issues is that, revisiting it after that first reading, it really is a jolting and an eye-opening experience, because the fact that it was only 40 years after it was written that the scholars basically, or readers, basically sat up and said, "Oh, wait a minute, this isn't just a ghost story." Okay, Gilman's got other fish to fry. She's got much more of a powerful agenda in the story. Okay, Anyway, let's go to the story itself. So I've got this, this PDF. Okay, and it starts off as what we call a Gothic story, Gothic. And so Gothic stories were extremely popular literary form, especially in the 1800s. And you know, we still like them, and we still have a great taste for them. I mean, almost all of our, not, I shouldn't say almost of, but a huge percentage of like scary movies, scary stories, ghost stories are Gothic stories. And, you know, one of the major themes you see in a Gothic story is scary house in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street, right? The Gothic stories. And so it starts a colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, I would say a haunted house. Okay, so here it starts off as kind of a classic Gothic story, classic like ghost story. Anyway, let's move on. And one of the things that you should know about this story is that it uses a particular strategy called the Unreliable Narrator. So the story is told from the first person perspective. So in writing, there are three persons: first person, second person, third person. The first person narrative is when the narrator is the main character in the story. So so here is, you know, one of the most important first person narratives ever. Okay, the yellow wallpaper, and there are first person narratives, and then the other half of the stories are third person narratives. Third person narratives are when you have this third person narrator who's not named, but it's kind of giving you the God's eye view of the story. We'll get to that in a minute. Not in a minute, but we'll get to that later in the semester. Okay, so and an unreliable narrator is a challenge for readers because what happens if the narrator is compromised? What happens if the narrator is a child? Okay, now we're going to actually read a story later where you see something from the perspective, you see information from a child's perspective, but you know, what do you do if you're being told a story by a child? Okay, well, you have to decode it, right? So here you have on the top of page 648, you've got this really interesting sentence, which always makes me crack up, okay? And that is, so I take phosphates or phosphites, whatever it is, okay? And so she is the narrator, okay? The woman in the story is the narrator, and she has to take either phosphates or phosphites. How come she doesn't know?
Because he's not actually explained about the medicine. She's just given it and she takes it without questioning.
Exactly. Very good, Mr. Morphus. The husband's a doctor. He gives her things and she just takes it. She doesn't find out what they're made of. Okay. So she doesn't even know the medication that she's on. Okay. So, and there's lots of stuff in this story where the narrator does not have the vocabulary to describe the events that are going on in her life. Now, this gets really frightening, okay, when you get to this section that I have highlighted on the second half of the page here. It is a big, airy room, the whole floor nearly, with windows that look all ways and air and sunshine galore. It was nursery first, and then playroom and gymnasium I should judge. For the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things on the wall. Now, the part that cracks me up is the rings and things. Okay. So she doesn't know what that stuff is called. So she calls them rings and things. But the first piece of information is she says it was a nursery first, and then playroom and gymnasium. Okay. By the way, let's see how good you are at decoding this information. Is any of that true? What is this room? What is this house? Hopefully you figured it out.
An old insane asylum.
Very good, Miss Bard. It's an old, abandoned, insane asylum. Okay, but
I have a quick question about the rings on the walls.
yeah,
If it was an insane asylum, don't you think they would have made sure not to have things on the walls that could be used for suicide attempts, things that could be attached to other things?
yeah, those are the restraining devices. Those are the restraints on the walls.
It just seems a little weird that that would be left there.
Wow, Ms. Bard, are you implying that these insane asylums were somehow poorly managed?
I don't know, maybe.
But the narrator doesn't know this. It doesn't know that it's a former insane asylum. Why doesn't she know?
Her husband didn't bother to tell her.
Because she only knows what she knows. Okay, she doesn't know what an insane asylum is or what it looks like. She only knows what her husband tells her. Okay, her husband told her it's an old house. Okay, he probably told her that it was the nursery. Okay, but she doesn't know that it's an old insane asylum. Furthermore, you don't either, because you're getting all of your information from this unreliable narrator. Okay, now what I hope at the very least is that you'll reread the story now that you know all this stuff, and you'll start this story will start getting much clearer to you as you go on. And then in the very next paragraph, anyway, before I get to the next paragraph, so you have windows are barred for little children. No, that's not why the windows are barred. And there are rings and things. These are the restraining devices. And, Ms. Bard, to kind of answer a more specific question that you had, or a point that you brought up, and that is, I get the impression that they shut this thing down and they just they bolted. Okay, they were like, this insane asylum was like one step ahead of law enforcement. They just left. Okay. Okay, the very next paragraph is when you have the introduction of the wallpaper, the yellow wallpaper. Now, by the way, this story has just grown exponentially in terms of popularity and in terms of influence in American literature and in the American psychology. This story has become a great masterpiece. And about a year or so ago, I consulted Rabbi Google and looked up, what did the yellow wallpaper look like? Okay, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of these web pages that suggest what people think the yellow wallpaper looked like. Okay, so I mean, yeah, on one hand, it's like, don't these people have anything better to do? But on the other hand, that's so cool. It bears witness to just how important this story is to people. Okay. So the introduction to the paper is in the next paragraph. The paint and paper look as if a boys' school had used it. Okay. It is stripped. Okay, so you have this wallpaper, and a lot of it has already been ripped down. Okay, how did that happen?
Former tenants of the room.
Very good. Former tenants of the room, people who are literally insane, clawing at the walls. Okay, that's how the wallpaper got all shredded up. Okay. And then this famous line, I never saw a worse paper in my life. Okay, well, think about it. What sort of wallpaper would you put in an insane asylum? I mean, you certainly wouldn't go, to the wallpaper store and get, I want your best paper. Okay. I want my patients to have the best wallpaper available. No, chances are it was the worst, Paul, cheapest, worst wallpaper imaginable. That's the wallpaper you're probably going to put in your insane asylum. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. And by the way, I put all these highlighted terms I've got on my screen are, I put the wallpaper quotes in blue, okay? So I should have put it in yellow, I guess, in retrospect. The color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow turning sunlight. And one of the things that you might have found dreadful or boring or taxing on your patience, at the very least, is just how many words in this story are dedicated to describing this wallpaper. I mean, because these descriptions are just numerous. I'm sure somebody out there on the internet has counted up the number of words that are used to describe the wallpaper, but this story is like 10 pages long, but half of it is a description of the wallpaper, right? So I was every time she goes on this long description of the wallpaper, I start laughing, like, here we go again. Okay, now here on page 649, here you have, just before this first, you have these asterisks here, and these asterisks are implying that a period of time has elapsed. Okay, so she's describing this wallpaper, and what you have to understand is that she is writing this in a secret diary. Okay, so think about that for our why is my computer being so slow? Okay, so think about the secret diary being a symbol, okay, of what it is that Gilman is up to. Okay, why does the narrator have to write in secret? Let's go back to the story. And so she's writing this description of the wallpaper, and then she hears her husband walking up the stairs, and she says, "There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word." Okay, which always just makes my blood boil whenever I reread this story, and that is, why would the husband not want her to write?
He doesn't want her thinking for herself.
Good. Doesn't want her thinking for herself. Now, it's easy to, it's easy to drag John, but I don't know if actually that John loves his wife, and is genuinely concerned for her health. What's that?
So we're picking on John a little bit, but I don't really get where it's coming from, because so John is a physician, he's a man of logic. And what we know of people like that, back then at least, they actually weren't that smart, because we were really ignorant. I mean, we used to drive electrodes into people's brains to fix them. And you mentioned it during the first class about this book. He was actually applying a documented treatment to her called bed rest that they got from the Civil War, which was isolation, lots of air, lots of food, and no thought. So he didn't want you to be intellectually engaged because for some reason they believed that would make it worse. So him not wanting her to write was because he didn't want her to have mental stimulus. It was for her benefit, even if it wasn't actually for her benefit, he thought it was.
Yeah.
He's not cruel, he's just stupid.
Yeah. Excellent analysis. Okay. Yeah, and you know, I did preface it by saying it's easy to drag John, but Mr. Morphus, you're absolutely right. You know, he's not cruel. You know, none of this is from cruelty. It's only from ignorance and stupidity. But that's what Gilman is pointing out. Okay. And but you know, looking at this from 130 years later, I mean, you know, the whole being forbidden to write is a very powerful part of this symbolic level. Okay, and that is, you know, 99% of all writing in the history of the world are by men. Okay, 99% of all stories in the history of the world are about men. Okay, but men have only represented 50% of the population in the history of the world. You know, so but one thing is for sure, in the history of education, women were as a therapeutic method, it was counterproductive. But it's not really about that. It is about, you know, women lacking the education historically. Anyway, back to the story. Now here is where it's perfectly legitimate to drag John, because there's another subplot going on in the story that I hope after reading the story of an hour you were able to decode as well. And that is, John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. How far away did they travel to go to this haunted house in the middle of nowhere? I can tell you, I don't know in terms of miles, but it's away from his patients. It's away from where his patients are. Okay. When you move away, and this is in the 1800s, unless you're grabbing all your patients and moving them with you, you're away from the patients. Okay, so what's John doing? I'll give you a hint. He's not seeing his patients. But what is he telling his wife?
That he is seeing them.
That he is seeing his patients. Okay, and she is what is called credulous. This is a great English word, a great word in the English language. Credulous. I'll write it down. Okay. Man, why do you keep doing this? Okay. Credulous. Credulous. Credulous means believe anything anybody tells you. Believe anything anybody tells you. That's what I mean. That's credulous. So our narrator, part of her unreliability is that she's credulous. So when her husband tells her, "Oh, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be gone. I'll be gone till tomorrow because I got a real serious case." Okay, but but he's not where his patients are. He's in another town. Okay, so so where is he? What's he doing?
Cheating.
Well, that's a pretty shocking allegation there, Ms. DeBacco. The real correct answer is you don't know. Okay, you don't know. Now, Ms. DeBacco, you do know. Okay, you do know, and you're probably right. But we don't know because all our information is coming from this unreliable narrator. Okay, we readers have got to put two and two together. All right. So, and then you have this bombshell. Yeah, 3 or 4 pages. You got this bombshell, and this is where I have my this exclamation point in the text. It is Mary is so good with the baby, such a dear baby. Halfway through the story, just I know. Okay, Mary is so good with the baby. Not hopefully you were like, wait a minute, what? You just found out something. I think she would have said a lot longer before now, and she just had a baby. Okay, so now, like I said, it's easy to drag John because it's 2020, and we know a lot more about psychology. We know a lot more about
I guess the lag got to him.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because I actually want to have conversations about
hello.
the story, but it's really hard to when we keep losing.
What's that, Mr. Morphus?
I was saying I'm really interested in the story and I want to have conversations about it, but we keep
Can y'all hear me?
the lag is quite awful.
The lag is terrible.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, man, I don't know, for whatever reason, my connection's a little janky. All right, so yeah. Anyway, so let's go. So we have this bombshell. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I don't know if you heard me, but it's easy to drag John. But this was, so this was part of the rest cure. You've got to isolate the patients. Isolate her from all stimulation. So part of that is isolating from the baby. So it's an absolute wrong thing to do. Absolutely the wrong thing to do. Now, what's interesting to me about that, though, is that it seems to me that is aware of this in 1890. Okay, the absurdity of separating the mother from the child. Okay, now let's go to this next page where you have this really interesting question.
I can't see your screen anymore. Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I lost the connection and there for a second, so I'll share the screen. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so the next page where she is right in the middle of a lengthy description of the wallpaper. Never gets old, by the way. Always brings me joy. But in the places where it isn't faded and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to skulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. Actually, I need to highlight that because I think this is the first indication of the woman in the wallpaper. So let's go to highlights. All right. But anyway, the next one is there's sister on the stairs. Okay, so that's a really interesting sentence there. And that is, she puts that diary away whenever she hears her husband coming up the stairs, because she has to hide this diary. But he has to hire the diary when John's sister, and by the way, there's Jane and there's Mary, and I always mix up which one they are. One's the housekeeper and one's the sister. I don't know which one is which. But there's, by the way, she said there's sister on this. Maybe she doesn't know which one is which either. I just thought about that. This is like the 100th time I've read this story too. So that's a complication. But why is she hiding the diary when the sister's coming up to the room?
The sister will most likely report right back to John and tell her that she's writing, and he'll come and take away her diary.
Yeah, and that would be the ultimate worst case scenario for her, I think. Okay, and that is to lose the one thing that she's got that is keeping her hanging on by a thread, and that is writing. Okay, so think about writing as being symbolic, a symbol in the story as well, and that is Gilman is revealing that women have been prevented from writing. Okay, women have been historically prevented from writing, and so here's the symbol of that in the story, that John prevents her from writing, and John has enlisted his sister in the prevention of this writing. So you could write your whole PhD dissertation on that, and that is the sister being part of the system that prevents the woman from writing. Okay. Anyway, let's keep going. Kind of running out of time here. And we have, she mentions cousin Henry and Julia. You don't ever meet them, but they are the only two people that she mentions in the story that actually would like to see. And her husband says, nope, not gonna happen. And then, the only people that she's allowed to see are his family, okay? And you can probably imagine how much fun that is for her, okay? So anyway. Okay, and then another thing that, like I said, it is easy to drag John in this story, and it's kind of a hobby of mine. So one of the really disturbing about John is what's called infantilization. Infantilization, and which means, let me write that word down. Infantilization means to treat someone like a child. To treat someone like a child, and you have, and this is how John treats his wife. Okay, like a child, and that is, dear John gathered me up in his arms and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed and sat by me and read to me till it tired my head. He said I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well. So here you see one of the first examples in the story where he is literally treating his wife like a child, carrying her up to bed, telling her a story, reading to her a story. And this gets worse later on. Okay, let me find it. Where is it? Where he actually speaks to her in baby talk. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so that same page where they're talking about her health, and she says to him, my appetite may be better in the evening when you are here, but it is worse in the morning when you are away. And then he says to her, bless her little heart, okay, said he with a big hug, she shall be as sick as she pleases. By now, let's improve the shining hours by going to sleep and talk about it in the morning. Okay, so there he is literally talking to her in baby talk, okay? Bless her little heart. I mean, that's just savage. Okay.
Unless he's lying, that's how he talks.
Like, which would be worse, right? This is how he's always talked to her. Okay, so anyway, my job is not to, ladies, it's not my job to give you dating advice, but don't stick around with the guy who talks to you like this. Okay, so don't stick it out. Okay, let's keep going. And then we have the mysterious ending that is actually kind of hinted at in just in the kind of towards the end of the story here, where she says, I've got a rope up here that even Jenny did not find. Jenny is the housekeeper, okay? Or is it so this rope? So she's got this secret diary, she's got this secret rope, and then you find out what she does with the rope at the very end when you see this on this second to last column here. I am securely fastened now by my well-hidden rope. Okay, where is she fastened? Where is the rope fastened?
Possibly to one of the rings on the wall.
Well, it's fastened to her neck. Okay, now where she has fastened the rope, it's not said. I always see it in mind that she's got as actors or something like that, but it's not clarified in the story. Although, Ms. Bard, you're probably right, and that is you got all these restraining devices on the walls, so it's probably one of those. And so she hangs herself, and then John comes rushing in, and then there's two possibilities, and one is that this is a story that is written, that a ghost has written. Okay, that after her death, the ghost has written the story. Okay, or it is only this part. Okay. After the part where it says, that silenced him for a few moments. So only the part after that part is the part where she's dead. She's already dead. Okay, but one thing's for sure, and that is the part where she's creeping over him. That's after her death. She's literally a ghost at that moment in the story. But like I said, it is a hobby of mine to drag John, and I do find it hilarious that he's the one who has the hysterical response at the end of the story, right? Okay, he sees his wife has died and he's fainted like a girl, right? Okay, so ostensibly like a woman would respond. So I
Or
do
like
think that's
that person who cared about his spouse. Also, I don't think she killed herself. I've read this over and over, and I've read other people's analysis, and the general consensus is not that she killed herself. It makes,
oh, she's yeah.
I mean, it makes much more sense
Um,
that she tied herself to something in the room so they couldn't take her out of it because that was her yellow room. That was the room
Okay.
she
in
belonged to.
which case, how would she get out to creep over him? How would she get
Over him
released?
in the room? She's creeping around in circles in the room. She mentions right here, you have it up on the screen. I am securely fastened by my rope. You don't get me out. She doesn't want to leave. It is so pleasant to be out in this great room. I don't want to go outside. She wants to stay in her prison. She tied herself to something in the room so they can't take her out. I mean, realistically, how would she hang herself? The facets might be,
At the secret rope. Yeah.
but I mean, what's the rope? Maybe head height? You don't hang yourself from head height. I mean, it's practically impossible.
Well, I would say that most scholars, agree that this is a suicide at the end, and that's why he fainted. Okay, because his wife is dead.
Well,
What else would make him faint?
Walking into a room where his wife looks like a mess, where she's ripped the wallpaper off from the walls, tied to a bedpost, crawling around in circles, looking like a mad woman. I mean, that's pretty dramatic.
I don't think that would make me faint. I don't think that would make you faint.
Well, I mean, I don't know what your experiences were, but I've seen dead people. I didn't faint. Did you faint? I mean, I think it just depends on the person's disposition.
Well, even so, I mean, either way, it is a hysterical response that he's seen.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
and-
whatever he's walked in on, whether she's dead or just a mad woman, he had a hysterical response to it, no doubt.
So, all right, so there you have it. There's the story. And I love this. I mean, it's this is, and one thing you're right about, Mr. Morphus, is that there are lots of conflicting ideas about what it is that actually happened at the end of the story, because but kind of the most clear thing is you've got this unreliable narrator that is so unreliable we have no clear idea of what it is that happened even at the end.
Well, that's what makes it interesting, because she clearly, whatever happened, loses her mind, but she's still narrating. So you as the reader are just kind of dragged along for the trip.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's very excellently articulated, Mr. Morphus. Very good. Anyway, oh my gosh, we're out of time. Shoot. Okay. I've got 2 minutes. One of the things that I want to show you is, I want to spend at least 10 minutes talking about this tomorrow, because I want to show you the resources that I have available to you online, because you're going to have to write a research paper on one of the works in the course. And so I've got all this research compiled for you on eCampus. So I want to show you one source and then talk about it. And then we'll move on to the next thing. But we're out of time. But so anyway, have a great day, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow at 2:50. And then there won't be class on Wednesday and Thursday because of Thanksgiving break. Thanks y'all for a great class today. Very exciting, very stimulating. And I don't know, Mr. Morphus, you might have changed my mind about this, so that she might not be dead at the end. So I'm going to give that some thought. Okay, have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.